do we need to give one other minute for folks?
I think that we have pretty much all of them. Ms. Hines is the only one I'm not showing here yet.
Okay, no. Then,
but I can follow the roll. Mr. Stewart, I don't show him here as either.
Okay.
Mr. Younger either.
Yeah.
Well, we have stalled until it's 12:31, so we got we're 1 minute late. So let me go ahead and call the meeting to order. Welcome everyone to the April meeting of the Utilities Commission. And without further ado, Ms. Glenn, would you like to call the roll?
Sure, I'll be glad to. Good afternoon, commissioners. I'm going to start with Chairman Tuttle, Randall Tuttle.
Present.
Okay. Vice Chairman Wesley Curtis.
Present.
Okay. Commissioner Harold Day.
Present.
Commissioner Tom Griffin.
Present.
Commissioner Yvonne Hines. Present. Okay. Commissioner Hugh Jernigan.
Present.
Commissioner Dwayne Long.
Present.
Commissioner Chris Parker.
Here.
Commissioner Donald Stewart. Commissioner Charles Wilson.
Present.
Commissioner Alan Younger.
Present.
Okay. And Commissioner Hines, Yvonne Hines. I see her saying something. So
I saw her say present.
Okay. So, all right. Thank you. Thank you, commissioners. Okay.
Thanks, Patrice. Welcome, everybody. Also welcome to Ben from the Assistant City Manager's Office, who's going to give us a talk later. Courtney.
Okay, thank you. Good afternoon, commission members. Before we get started, I will introduce staff like I normally do. So we have Damon Duquesne, Assistant City Manager, Ben Rao, Assistant City Manager, Patrice Glenn.
Done something wrong. Right.
Okay. Patrice Glenn, Senior Administrative Assistant, Mike Quivisto, Deputy Director, Jan McHarg, Assistant Director of Solid Waste, Michael Stover, Assistant Director of Operations, Shane Chu Huffman, Capital Projects Engineer, Ricky Rubio, Budget Analyst, Todd Lewis, Senior Civil Engineer, Gail Kettler and Kyra Boyd with the Communications Team, Lisa Saunders, Chief Financial Officer, Kelly Latham, Deputy Financial Officer, Jerry Bates, Purchasing Director, and I don't see Kirk, but maybe he's on here. So Jakir Westbrook and Jordan Page with the Office of Business Inclusion and Advancement. And I think that covers everybody on the call from staff. Okay, so let me share my screen and then we'll go ahead and get rolling. Okay, just a few welcome and announcements, and then a slight change to the agenda that Patrice sent out to you last week. We're going to go over our water and sewer financial updates first before Ben Rao gets up and presents information on the American Rescue Plan Act. And then we'll have our water and wastewater updates and our solid waste updates, followed with the agenda items and our CIP update. So upcoming meetings, Patrice sent out an email this morning where we are requesting to cancel the April 20th finance meeting. We need a little more time to evaluate our rate recommendations on the water and sewer side and also finalize our operation budget. So we would like to cancel that meeting and present that information at the April 27th meeting, which we've had on our schedule because we have it as a as-needed meeting. So hopefully there's no conflicts with that. So once Patrice confirms that the Finance Committee is good with that date, we will make that adjustment and cancel the 20th, the meeting on the 20th. Most of you may know, but we won a national championship for water facilities. Yes, we're very proud of that. So it was under the Engaging Local Government Leaders, our water tank off Sides Road with the picture of the otter. actually won the championship. And so, yeah, it was great PR for the utility, for the county, and for the city of Winston-Salem. So we're very excited about that. Thank you for all those who helped us achieve that. We have virtual Earth Day Fair, which is April 19th through the 23rd. Just a reminder that we are sponsors of that event, and there will be plant tours, virtual tours, as part of that event. I just wanted to let the commission know that we issued an emergency declaration at Elledge Wastewater Treatment Plant last week. And basically, an emergency declaration is, the city manager has the authority to declare an emergency in accordance with General Statutes 143-129E2 for cases of social emergency involving the health and safety of people or their property. It allows us staff to bypass the normal bidding process to be able to quickly facilitate a repair. And so this was a situation where we needed to facilitate the design and the repair quickly. Our digester sludge transfer pipe was exposed in Salem Creek due to severe erosion, and I have a picture on the next slide. But it is in danger of failing, which would cause a significant sanitary sewer overflow. So right here is the picture, as you can see. So we are working to make those repairs. And with that, unless there's any other questions for me, I will turn it over to Mike Clavisto to give us an update on our water and sewer financials.
Hey, Courtney, this is Chris. So that digester sludge transfer pipe, it hasn't been breached. We haven't had any leaks or anything.
Mike Stover may have the latest information on that, but to my knowledge at this point, we have not. Is that correct, Mike Stover?
That's correct. It has not spilled, but we're trying to get ahead of it before it does.
Okay, that's good news.
Okay. Thank you, Courtney. Good afternoon, Commission members. We'll start by taking a look at the billed water and wastewater revenues for the current fiscal year, represented by the blue bar, which are $2.7 million higher through the first 9 months of the year compared to last year. And also above the budget, overall, our consumption is up about 1.5%, and we're seeing an increase of about $1.6 million in system development fee revenue so far this year. On the expenditure side, through the first 9 months of FY21, we're slightly higher than we were in FY20, but still currently under budget. And this slide shows our past due balances since last April, with the blue bar representing the current past due balance total and the orange bar representing the past due balances at the same time the previous year. We're currently sitting at $4.4 million in past due balances through March, which is down from a high of $5.6 million in October, and is just $1.6 million more than at the same time last year. So this trend continues to be in the right direction, with some new help on the way for our customers who may need assistance. We'll talk more about that in a moment. This slide shows a history of delinquent accounts, where we're also seeing a further decrease through March, when we ended the month with slightly over 12,000 delinquent accounts. An average delinquent balance was $358 per account. As mentioned previously, our billed revenues are currently $2.7 million ahead of last year. Given where we are 9 months through the year, we now anticipate finishing the fiscal year with about $120 million in billed revenue, which would be $9 million more than what we budgeted. But we did want to also note that this is more in line, this $120 million is more in line with where we thought we would actually end up in FY20. So just for additional context, this slide shows our current past due balances in yellow. It shows that we'd likely have a buffer if for some reason we were unable to continue to progress with our collection efforts, which as long as the accounts remain active, we'll have a good opportunity to continue to collect those past due balances. Moving on to talk about our customer assistance programs. There are several programs that are currently available for customers needing assistance to pay utility bills, most of which require that the customer meet certain income thresholds and that the customers have been financially impacted by the pandemic. The Emergency Rental Assistance Program began on April 5th. It was advertised on local news, the city's website, and social media. The city received $8 million and the county received $4 million. And we'll keep you all updated on that as it progresses, and we get some information about how that's helping our customers. On the Rent Utilities Mortgage Assistance Program, that began on March 29th, and it has up to $500,000 for utilities and rent for our customers. I think we've mentioned to you all that we've strengthened our partnerships with our local nonprofits, and several of them are offering donation programs to assist our customers. And finally, we did receive the HOPE program, was a state program that was funded via federal dollars. It's out of money, and it's continuing to be distributed across the state. We've currently received about $173,000 on behalf of our customers to date, and don't know if we'll receive much more than what we've received to this point. Any questions on any of that? Okay, so as we've seen, our billed revenues are tracking significantly better than our budget, and our delinquent balances and accounts are also trending in the right direction, which is positive news. But as we head into our operating budget meeting, we did want to provide some additional context about the impact of the pandemic on our overall financial picture and where we had planned to be with our projected revenues at this time last year. So we had anticipated the following revenue needs prior to the pandemic to meet our PAYGO and debt coverage ratio goals. In FY20, we were looking at about $120.8 million. And at this time last year through March, we were tracking to hit this number. And then consumption fell off in the last quarter of the fiscal year, and we ended the year at about $115 million in billed revenue. And then also, when we were projecting our rate increases and our revenue needs at this time in March of last year, we were projecting to need revenues of $126.2 million for FY21. So if you look at the difference based on our March 2020 projected revenue needs, for FY20, we finished the year $5.6 million short of our budget, and that was an actual number. Then in FY21, we're currently projecting to finish about $6.2 million behind where we had hoped to be at this time last year. And then that kind of cumulative two-year total is $11.8 million. And the next slide kind of shows that graphically. The blue bar shows you what we had projected in March of 2020. We thought we'd get $121 million for FY20, and that we were projecting to need $126 million in FY21. And the red shows you what we actually got in FY20, which was $5.6 million less than anticipated. And although we are significantly ahead of our budget for FY21, we're also $6 million behind where we had originally projected to be. And the intent here is kind of to show that the pandemic has put us behind where we had hoped to be from a revenue generation standpoint. So I'll pause there and ask if there are any questions about that.
Mike, can you go back to the slide, maybe 3 slides ago, when you were showing the amount of relief that we were offering people who needed like a repayment plan? One more. Yeah, there you go. Emergency rental assistance. Okay. And how does those $8 and $4 million amounts compare to previous year, pre-COVID years?
So this is it's a brand new program that is for COVID impacted customers, and we anticipate that a lot of that will be taken up by rental assistance, and it does provide utility relief, but that's also gas and electric along with water as well. So we've sent out, the city sent out notifications to customers, and then the utility, we've sent out a letter to our customers who have delinquent balances, trying to encourage them to apply as quickly as possible to see if they meet the thresholds and the needs to get some relief.
Thanks very much.
Mm-hmm. Okay, so just kind of a quick update on our recent rate history. In FY20, our rate increase, we did basically it was a $2.05 total bi-monthly increase in the readiness to serve charge. We did not do an increase on the volumetric side. And then we had anticipated in FY21 needing about a 5% increase, but we did not do a rate increase based on the unknowns with the pandemic. And that 5% increase would have gotten us to about that $126 million that we had originally projected about a year ago. Now we're anticipating to end the year at about $120 million. And so we're currently in the discussions about what's going to happen for FY22. We still want to be mindful of the COVID impacts to our customers, but it is looking like we're going to need an increase, perhaps in the 5% range. But an increase is in line with what we're hearing from our peer utilities as well. But we'll have more information on that at the Finance Committee meeting in 2 weeks. Any questions about any of that information?
Okay.
Okay.
I'm gonna pull up Ben's presentation now, and I will turn it over to Ben.
Thank you, Courtney. Good afternoon, Chairman Tuttle, members of the Utility Commission. Courtney asked me to give you all an update on the American Rescue Plan Act of 2021 and the plan for the use of those funds. So I just wanted to share with you some slides here to kind of give you some background about the act and kind of what the next steps are in terms of the city council's planning for the use of the funds. Next slide, Courtney. So last month on March 11th, President Biden signed into law the American Rescue Plan Act of 2021. That's a $1.9 trillion package to help the country recover from the public health emergency as well as the economic impact of COVID-19. Of that $1.9 trillion, $350 billion is dedicated to state and local governments. Since that time, city staff have attended some webinars from the National League of Cities, the North Carolina League of Municipalities, and International City County Management Association to just get more information about the act and what's in it. And so that's part of what I hope to share with you this afternoon. You can see here on this slide that one part of the act is what's called the Coronavirus Local Fiscal Recovery Fund. That's the fund that does provide assistance to local governments. And in that, Winston-Salem is scheduled to receive $55.1 million. Then you can see what the other municipalities in Forsyth County and within the Utility Commission service area, what they are scheduled to receive, as well as Forsyth County. Next slide. So I want to talk a little bit about what are the eligible uses of these particular funds. One, they can be used to respond to the public health emergency and the negative impacts from the pandemic, and that can include assistance to households, small businesses, nonprofits, and the travel and tourism industry. Also, it can be used to provide premium pay to eligible workers who provide essential work, provide essential services, and that could also include grants to eligible employers who have workers who perform essential work. What we've learned since the enactment of the law is that could be as much as up to $13 per hour or $25,000 per year in premium pay. A third, the funds could be used to offset any reductions in revenues that a local government relies on to provide their services to their communities. And the mark that's going to be used is the changes that occurred since January 1st of 2020. That was the date that the World Health Organization declared that we were in a global pandemic. And then lastly, the funds could be used to make investments in water, sewer, or broadband infrastructure. There's some questions out now whether sewer also includes stormwater management. But the bottom line is all of these uses are waiting for specific guidance from the Treasury Department. We have not read anything at this point, and everybody really is just waiting to see exactly how we can use these funds. So if you go to the next slide, Courtney, there are two ineligible uses of the funds. I wanted to just mention, number one, that the funds cannot be used to basically fund any kind of tax reduction, or as it says there, it can't delay the imposition of a tax or a tax increase. And this would apply to any measures taken since March 3rd of this year. So it cannot be used to provide any kind of tax relief in that regard. And then secondly, it cannot be deposited into a pension fund. So it cannot help a local government meet its pension obligations. Next slide. So some other considerations that we've learned, since March 11th, as we await the specific guidance from Treasury. If the funds are used to fill a municipal hole, then the funding could become unrestricted and available for any local government cost or purpose. And so I think, how we account for the funds and address those types of fiscal deficits, if we do use the funds for that, then the money really would be available for any purpose. We can use the funds to address any local government needs, and that could include transferring funds or providing funding to community nonprofits and businesses and other organizations. Third, we've learned that the eligible use for water, sewer, and broadband projects does not have to be a project that's specifically related to COVID-19 impact. Fourth, I think that what you see from those previous three bullets, that the intent of the law is to provide as much flexibility to local governments in terms of addressing the impacts from the pandemic. And one area that's really highlighted is the tourism, travel, and hospitality sectors that have been really devastated by the impact by the pandemic. And then finally, one suggestion that we've heard is that we ought to perform what's called a negative economic impacts test. That any kind of project or program or use that we consider that may have been harmed either revenue-wise or otherwise by the pandemic, that we really kind of confirm that. And if we really feel like that you can't make that kind of linkage, then you should invest the funds elsewhere, because what we have been told is that there will, as I'll mention here in a minute, that we will be required to provide reports to Treasury, and they'll be monitoring the usage of the funds. So some of the other requirements. First off, the funds out of this coronavirus local fiscal recovery fund will be distributed in two tranches. One is set to be released here probably right around May 11th, 60 days after the law went into effect. And then the second tranche will be distributed 12 months after that. So we're working very quickly to try to have proposals in place so that when $27.5 million shows up in the city's checking account, we're ready to move forward. The funds will be available through December 31st, 2024. As I mentioned a moment ago, that local governments will be required to provide periodic reports to the Treasury Department. And then finally, just an affirmation that yes, the funding is based on census data, and that the final number will be based on the most recent data from the Census Bureau. And so we feel pretty certain that still the $55.1 million is a good number. So I've really focused on this one particular part of the law, but there are numerous other funding opportunities in the law, and really want to make a point of this, and have made a point of this to council and to city staff. And you can see here, this is just a sample of the other funding opportunities that potentially local governments could access as part of the law. So FTA grants, which should be for our transit system. We already know that we're going to receive $11 million through that program. Shutter venue operator grants, restaurant revitalization fund, low-income home energy assistance programs. So just various other pots of money, really, that could be available to local governments. And the one piece of guidance that we have heard a number of times is that we need to focus on spending these dedicated funds. If we're fortunate enough to receive any funds through these other programs, then we need to spend those first before we start using the coronavirus local fiscal recovery funds. Next slide. So I wanted to share the City Council's new initiatives for the next 4 years. They went through a strategic planning process over the last couple of months and held 2 sessions on March 24th and 25th. And out of their discussions, they came up with a list of new initiatives that will guide their decision-making and priority setting for the next 4 years. I'm not going to read the list that's there, you can see, but it's broken down into 3 groupings. The first grouping being the areas that receive the most votes, if you will, or interest by the council as a group. The second group in there, the second most, and then the last group there, the remaining initiatives. City management staff will be working to develop action items for each of these initiatives. So even though they're kind of somewhat in priority groupings, the intent is still to work on all of these initiatives over the upcoming 4 years. So, and thinking about that, and thinking about the ideas that the council is considering for use of the $55.1 million, there are some guiding principles that will govern kind of how we develop those proposals. Number one is a commitment to transparency. At some point here in the near future, we're going to stand up a web page so that we can communicate to the community how we plan to spend the money, and then to provide reports and data on how we're spending the money, hopefully even to be able to report on outcomes that we're achieving. And then also to be a clearinghouse for some of these other funding opportunities that you saw on that previous slide with the circles, because there may be programs that the city cannot access, but citizens and entities within the community may be able to access, and we can at least help point them to those programs and make sure that they're aware of those opportunities. Second, the real focus, on the uses will be on one-time needs. What we're not looking to do is to invest in new programs or any kind of investment that has an ongoing impact to the city's budget. And so what you'll see in the coming weeks is really a focus on those one-time needs. It may be, relief to certain entities. And so with that, a third principle is restoration. This is the American Rescue Plan Act. I'll talk about some other initiatives of the president on the horizon here in a moment. The focus of this will be on helping to restore some of the sectors of our local community. So whether it's the small business sector, the nonprofit sector, the travel and tourism sector, a lot of the focus will be on restoration. And then finally, transformation. We recognize that probably this is a once in a generation, certainly a once in a career moment as far as receiving money of this magnitude. And so part of what the council will be discussing over the coming weeks will be what kind of uses can we look at that will be transformative for the community, that could move the needle. One potential example could be broadband, and what kind of investments can we make to truly address the challenges that have become as a result of the pandemic. So those are the principles that will be guiding kind of how the proposals are developed in the coming weeks. City management has already put into place an internal organization to help us with planning for the uses, and also to manage the use of the funds. And you can see there how that chart has been, how this organization has been developed. We have, of course, the mayor and council will be setting the policy and giving us the guidance as far as how to use the funds. The executive committee is basically the city manager and his senior staff. The steering committee, which will flesh out a lot of the proposals and develop the guidelines for certain programs. For example, if we look to provide small business grants, then to create the guidelines for how those grants would be awarded. And then finally, the task force would be actually what I'm calling the hands and feet of this process. So really monitoring the use of the funds, making sure that all the logistics are being covered as far as, administering the money. And you can see there on the right-hand side in the circle, strategics. Strategics is our federal consulting firm that assists us with legislation, just keep us informed of what's happening in Washington. And so they will continue to advise the steering committee over the coming weeks as far as any guidance that comes out of Washington, and also just helping us stay aware of these other funding opportunities and timelines and that type of information. Then next steps, just to talk about kind of what the city is looking to do here in the coming weeks, and we are trying to operate, at a very quick pace. Of course, here first and foremost, we're waiting on the guidelines from Treasury. That is going to really dictate a lot of how our planning will proceed, based on how we can actually use the funds. We are going to look at these other areas and see what other opportunities we may want to pursue in terms of funding it through these other programs. We are looking to identify potential community partners to assist with the administration of the funding. I mean, this is just a huge amount of money, and the idea of granting some of it to small businesses or nonprofits, just the logistics of managing that, would be enormous and probably would be, tax our own, staffing capacities. And so we're going to look to community partners to perhaps help who already have that type of structure to perhaps partner with us to assist with administering those dollars. As I mentioned, we've created the steering committee and the task force. And so those two groups are meeting here very soon. And then here again, according to that one guiding principle about transparency, the city is going to develop a marketing plan and a community engagement strategy to make sure that the public is informed about what we're doing. But we're also going to reach out to the public for ideas. And so one plan is to schedule a public input meeting before the first tranche is distributed in May to receive feedback from the public about what they think we should be investing the funds in. And so that's something that will be on the horizon. And then coupled with that, setting up the web page, getting all our infrastructure in place, if you will, for communicating to the public about these funds. And then finally, city management will take forward the specific proposals to the mayor and council for their consideration and approval. And that could be a special meeting of the council somewhere here in the coming weeks for them to establish the guidelines to determine the allocations of the $55.1 million to really put everything in place so that we can move forward with utilizing those funds. So to just conclude here, just want to talk about on the horizon. So I've been talking about the American Rescue Plan Act, $1.9 trillion, and the potential funding opportunities even within that plan. There are other funding opportunities that will be available to the city. Number one there is the Congress has reinstituted what used to be called earmarks. They're now called community project funding requests. We've already submitted a couple of modest requests through our congressman. And then secondly, President Biden has discussed the Build Back Better recovery plan. And last month he unveiled the American Jobs Plan, which is another $2 trillion investment plan that will take place over 8 years. And within that plan, there's $620 billion available for infrastructure. So as you all know, those discussions are happening in Congress. And so we'll just see what comes out of that. But we know that there, if this is successful, that there will be significant funding for infrastructure. So, and beyond the American Jobs Plan, the president indicated that it's probably sometime this month that he was going to talk about another recovery package that I think is supposed to be more focused on families. And that could be another significant investment. So with that, I'll be happy to answer any questions.
I have a question, Ben. This is Dwayne Long. Back in about the middle of your presentation, you mentioned that some of the funding could be used to fill a municipal hole. What is a municipal hole?
So, Mr. Long, I think they're thinking, if there's any kind of deficit in the city. I mean, I think whether it's filling a reduction in a revenue source or, like I said, a deficit of some kind. So if the funds basically are used to help offset that kind of deficit, then, those funds can become unrestricted and available for any local government purpose.
The other question I've got is the time frame of this. You mentioned that Congress will vote May 11th, and then there'll be 60 days to spend this out. Should we be working on projects now to present to this committee? Is it going to rush through? Do we need to be doing something now?
So, Mr. Long, first of all, so the law went into effect on March 11th. The first tranche is scheduled to be distributed on May 11th.
May 11th, okay.
It had to be distributed 6 days after the law was enacted, which was in March. So that's why we're looking at May 11th as okay. That May 11th, we'll wake up and there's going to be $27.5 million sitting in our checking account. So we are willing to move quickly to, put proposals in front of the council so that we have something in place, at least a plan for how we will utilize the first $27.5 million. I mean, we have until 2024, the end of 2024, to spend all the money, but we know, I mean, that there are a lot of discussions already taking place. I mean, the city's already been approached about needs from various entities in the city. So that we are moving quickly to try to develop proposals to take to council so that those can be in place, soon after May 11th, so that we can move forward and start to get those funds into the community.
Okay.
Dwayne, on your first question, I don't think it's a surprise why Mike led off our talk today with all of our revenue shortfalls. And then we hear this about this program. So I'm presuming our very talented staff is going to be looking at reasons and theories around what the Utility Commission's role in this program is. So toward that, Ben, one question. You've given us the city perspective. We are a city-county joint commission. And so I presume that we would also, if the Utility Commission is so fortunate to play a role in this act, there's also probably on the county side as well.
Chairman Toller, that's correct. The county's set to receive $75 million. I've been asked a number of times, is the city going to work with the county on potential uses of the funds, and what we've shared with folks is that we will have discussions with the county. We've already had some discussions with county management about ideas where it would make sense for the city and the county to combine the resources. And one good example of how we've already done that is with the Emergency Rent Assistance Program, where the city and the county both receive federal funding for that program, and we're actually jointly administering those funds. And so I think that where it makes sense, look at those kinds of opportunities.
Cool, thank you. And as a citizen, I want to thank you for this the slide that had the word transformative on it. I do think this is once in a career, once in a generation, and figuring out a way to make our community better for all. I think this is a great. So thank you for that. One final question for me, and then I'm sure others have it. On the slide that you had, the strategic bubble and then the steering committee and the task force, I'm thinking about bond referendum steering committees. Are there any citizenry on those third and fourth boxes, or is that mainly just the community input side? The meetings you discussed.
In terms of the organization chart?
Well, when I hear steering committee, I thought about the bond referendums because I think that was also called steering committee as they were reviewing proposals. So is this steering committee mainly city departments?
It is, and this is an internal structure that we've put in place to help us manage it. Ultimately, the proposals will move up the organization to the mayor and council. One idea that we have talked about internally is, in terms of administration of the funding, who would be, who could we look to do that? Whether we work with a community partner, or whether we utilize some of the existing appointed boards and commissions. I'll give you one example. The Citizen Bond Oversight Committee, that's charged with monitoring the use of the funds from the 2018 city bond referendum. The council gave them the responsibility to conduct a grant-making process for $1 million in what we call community investment grants. And so they had actually assisted with COVID-19 response fund grants last spring. And so, there's a possibility that we may look at existing appointed boards and commissions that it would be appropriate for them to be involved in a particular use of the funds, whether it would be, allocation of grants to nonprofits or grants to small businesses. So that's something that we are exploring.
Got it. Thank you. Thank you very much.
Randall, I got one question. On the first $12 million, I think the city county's getting, I understand it was a company going to disburse that money for 10% of it. Are we going to have an outside force diversing this money at 10% of all these trillions of millions of dollars? Or is city staff going to do it?
Mr. Day, in terms of administering the money?
That's correct.
So, right now, we were looking at the possibility of identifying some community partners that could help us with administering the funds. If we were to do that, I imagine that part of funding would be allocated to help with administrative costs. But otherwise, it would be something we would manage internally. And at this point, we're not sure, if we would. First of all, we're not sure if we'll be able to use any of the funds for administrative purposes. Usually, there's a little bit of an allocation of funds for those types of things, and this is such a massive undertaking that we would need some administrative support. So that here again, we're waiting on the Treasury to provide us the specific guidance, and once we get that, we'll kind of know what might be available to us to help us just with simply managing the funds. But obviously, the greatest priority is to maximize, getting the funds into the community.
Thank you.
Yeah, this is Chris Parker. I had a couple of questions. One is we're looking at that org chart. I see under the executive committee, we have director of operations. Would that be Courtney? Would she be on that executive committee?
Mr. Parker, the director of operations is Johnny Taylor. He oversees a number of our other public works operations, like our sanitation division, our property and facilities management department, which includes like fleet services, vegetation management, those areas. So Courtney would be part of the steering committee where it says city county utilities. She would be part of that. So that and again, that group is going to be really involved in fleshing out the proposals that would go to council for approval. So the guidelines, recommended allocation of the funds, those types of discussions.
Okay, well, Ben, I would just say that based on the percentage of our budget compared to the city budget, I would hope that Courtney is going to play a key part in this, that we do have a seat at the table, because there's certainly, as you went over, the number of things that the feds wanted to focus this money on. One was water and sewer projects. And then you mentioned even these two terms, restoration and transformation. And as I think about restoration, I think about this large project that we're looking forward to at the Nielsen Water Treatment Plant. And I think it's transformation. I'm looking at this AMI project as well. So I just want to make sure that we do have a seat at the table, at the head of the table. So some of these major expenditures that we're looking at, and these are not, something ongoing, which I think was another statement in there. It can't be an ongoing project. Can you maybe give the Utility Commission a little bit of reassurance that we are going to have a major seat at the table.
Well, definitely, Mr. Parker. I mean, I think that the part of the discussions we're having, now will involve, what is the best, way to program these funds. As I mentioned, with this American Jobs Plan and the $620 billion that'll be available for infrastructure there, we want to make sure that we don't run the risk of either duplicating effort or not utilizing a pot of money that would be more appropriate for one need versus the other. I mean, like I mentioned earlier, one of the pieces of advice that like the National League of Cities has given is focus on spending out the dedicated money first before you tap into something like the Coronavirus Local Fiscal Recovery Fund. And so, if we develop very specific proposals for, infrastructure needs, one part of the discussion could be, well, we need to pursue that funding source and preserve the Coronavirus Local Fiscal Recovery Funds, because when we do have until 2024 to spend it, and so there could be other emerging needs that arise that we should address. So certainly, I mean, utilities will be part of, those discussions in terms of infrastructure.
Any other questions? Well, Ben, thank you. Thank you so much for this update. It's a lot of good things going on. Thank you.
Thank you.
Okay. Just one thing that, before we move on, that Damon and I have been discussing is that the commission could direct staff to make sure, and Mr. Parker, you already kind of alluded to this, but direct staff to investigate or research uses or ways that the utility could use the funds, and then ultimately, make a request really to both the city and the county for those funds.
And do you need a motion or just sort of a head nod if we were to go?
I would say just a head nod, or we don't need a motion. Just that you want us to kind of pursue that. And I see some thumbs up, and so I assume that everybody's in agreement with that. But that would kind of be the direction that I feel, and Damon and I talked about that we would move forward with.
This is Chris. Courtney, yes, I definitely would want you, and if you're maybe not at the head of the table, that Damon represent and put forth a plan that we bring, because I don't want to be sitting on the sidelines later on looking at money we left on the table.
Yes, sir. We can do that.
Okay. Well, we will, if there's not anything else, we'll keep moving on. And next up is our water and wastewater update. So I will turn it over to, and thank you, Ben, for presenting that information. That was very, very beneficial.
Thank you.
So Mike Stover.
Good afternoon, commissioners. So far this calendar year, we've issued 13 water and sewer permits for a value of almost $4 million. I do want to point out that the unit cost for water and sewer footages was increased this past fall. It was existing $34 a linear foot for water, and that number went up to $107 a linear foot. And for sewer, it was $62 a linear foot, and it went up to $212. So we've been using those unit costs for several years. They were very outdated and not realistic. So Todd Lewis and his staff evaluated bid tabs and changed those costs appropriately. This is a graph showing the water and sewer mileage that we've permitted. We've permitted 1.1 miles of water, 2.0 miles of sewer so far. You can tell that things have slowed down a little bit. We're third of the way through the year, and we're substantially below where we've been in previous years. So we'll keep an eye on that moving forward. Here's the drought forecast. There's no county in North Carolina under drought conditions right now. March, we had a little over 5 inches of rain. Very similar to where we've been the last couple of years, slightly below where we were last year. If you look at this next slide, the monthly average for the month of March is 2.95 inches. So we were 2 inches above average, slightly below where we were last year, about a 2.6% decrease. And here's our fiscal year to date water production graph. Below the 5-year average, really below where we've been the last 3 years. So we'll keep an eye on this one as well. Here's our water quality sampling graphs. We took almost 27,000 samples at our 3 water plants just in March alone, and fielded almost 90 water quality calls in the field. Didn't have any violations at any of our plants or in our distribution system. Collection system update. We did receive the report from December. We had 1 notice of deficiency, 5 notice of violations. 2 of those were intended to enforce actions. 1 was for the Tanglewood force main failure back in December, and another was related to debris and grease in a sewer line. We haven't received the report for January, February, and March quite yet. Here's our sanitary sewer overflow per 100-mile chart. We're doing really well considering, still middle of the pandemic. Short staff, both on our contract cleaning crews and in-house. We are actually below where we were this time last year. And if you all remember last year, we set a record low for number of SSOs. So if we finish out the year strong, we will set yet another record. Here's the sanitary sewer overflows by cause. We had 7 total. 1 was inflow and infiltration related. 1 was caused by a bypass failure on an NCDOT project. 1 was pipe failure, and the other 4 were O&M related, fog, roots, and debris spills. Cleaning productivity, we're closing the gap between our scheduled cleaning goal of 20% and where we are so far this fiscal year. Between contractor cleaning and in-house cleaning, we've cleaned 253 miles of sewer mains. And then these next 2 slides, we just wanted to highlight our public education outreach campaigns. This one shows the can of grease work that Gail and Kyra have been working on with our industrial waste control group. One of your agenda items today is some revisions to the good neighbor policy. We've added some language on there, and we're updating that as well. And then the next slide is the No Wipes and Pipes campaign. And we are putting a lot of this information on our trucks and trailers. It's free advertising. And Courtney, I believe there's an animation that you can click on and show to the group.
Yep.
No wipes in pipes. Throw them in the trash instead. Paper towels, facial tissues, and so-called flushable wipes can cause sewage backups. Ugh, remember, no wipes in pipes.
Any questions on any water and sewer updates? Okay.
Okay. Thank you, Mike.
I must admit, I didn't realize tissues were a problem.
Yes, they are. Tissues are a problem as well. So they don't disintegrate like toilet paper does, so you should put them in the trash. And a lot of the, we have a problem with wipes as well. Even on the packaging, it'll say flushable when it's not actually flushable.
Hey, Mike, back on the volume and revenues of the fiscal year. So we are 9 months through our fiscal year, And the chart with the red water production is just stunning if I'm reading that correctly. Okay,
Yeah,
so never mind.
the scale throws it off a little bit, makes it look.
Yeah, the scale looks like it's off. It's 9.67 versus 9.97. Okay.
Right.
607. Sorry.
Yeah, the scale. We've talked about that before. The scale is very misleading.
All right, that probably answers my question. But to Covisto's earlier talk, we're still ahead of revenue budget. So that. All right. Cool.
Okay, and so Jan's going to give us a solid waste update. Jan, are you there? You might be on mute.
I guess it helps to unmute, doesn't it? Sorry about that.
We can hear you now.
Good afternoon, everyone. I apologize. So as was just mentioned, we're 9 months through the fiscal year, and we've taken in 199,185 tons at Haynes Mill Road landfill. We're tracking a little bit under the budget and behind where we were last year. We haven't done these updates in a couple months, but we dropped below the budget in January. So we have stayed a little bit under it since January of this year. And in this slide, you can see the volatility we're experiencing this year. We had these really low months in January and February. And even though you expect February to be the lowest month, it has been even lower than we would have anticipated. And then in March, we saw a boost. We jumped back up to almost 25,000 tons, which is really a record level of tonnage for the month of March. So very interesting year for us. And at Old Salisbury Road landfill, we're seeing similar trends. We are at 29,800 tons for the year, and underneath the budget, lower than the budget and last year, as we have been all year. But we did have a high month in March, took in almost twice as much as we had in the couple months prior to that. So it'll be interesting to see if these trends continue into the spring of the year and if the tonnage stays up that way. And this is a look at the revenues for the solid waste fund. We have taken in 8.3 million, and that's the blue bar on this chart. The red bar is last year's revenue. So we are lower than last year and a little bit lower than the budget. And because tipping fees are the primary source of revenues, that's consistent with the data that we just saw as far as how many tons are coming in. On the expense side, we have spent roughly $5.5 million. So we're well under the budget, but we are tracking a little ahead of where we were last year at the same point in the year. And that the largest contributor to that is yard waste. We've taken in a lot of yard waste. You may remember sanitation suspended some routes towards the end of FY20, and they've done a great job playing catch up and bringing in a lot of yard waste this year. So that's the biggest contributor to that. And I think we just have a couple other miscellaneous updates that we wanted to mention. I'm happy to take any questions on any of that data, but wanted you to know that there are 2 more Saturdays remaining in the leaf mulch giveaway. That's at 4 and 52, as you likely know. And we've had 3 days so far with good turnout, but there is enough material to have the 2 more days. So if you know anyone that needs mulch, there's no charge for that. You just have to bring a vehicle less than 1 ton in size and bring a tarp to cover for you. And the landfill gas system contract that was approved in December, that work has been largely completed. It may be finally complete by now, but all the wells are in and the piping is complete, and it is connected into the existing system. And we conducted the first quarter surface emissions event in March, and we believe we've already seen an improvement in the performance of the system. So we're well satisfied with how that work has gone. And I think that's all the information that we had today. I'm happy to answer any questions.
Okay.
Thank you.
Thanks, Jan. Okay, so next is agenda item. and I will turn it back to Mike Cordesto.
All right, thank you, Courtney. Thanks, Jan. Item 2 starts our finance items. Consideration of a resolution awarding a purchase order for 2 2-ton trucks with custom utility bodies. Utilities Field Operations has a need to replace 2 vehicles that are used by construction crews on a daily basis to oversee emergency and routine repairs to the water and sewer infrastructure in the system. Both vehicles have exceeded their useful lives, having regular downtime, excessive maintenance, and costly repairs. Bids were received on March 22nd, 2021 for the purchase of 2 Chevrolet 2-ton 4-wheel drive crew cab trucks with custom utility bodies. And Modern Automotive LLC of Winston-Salem was the low bidder at $106,667 per vehicle. And it is recommended that a purchase order be awarded to Modern Automotive LLC. The low bidder meeting specifications for the purchase of 2 Chevrolet 2-ton 4-wheel drive crew cab trucks with custom utility bodies in the amount of $106,667 each, for a total cost of $213,334.
I have a question on that.
Yes,
if I may.
Long.
Yeah,
certainly.
This total of $213,334 is typically the money that I think PAYGO is used for, isn't it? But I see that we're leasing these. Is there a reason for that?
So, Mr. Long, typically through the city's budget process, equipment or rolling stock that's over $10,000 is purchased through North Carolina Municipal Leasing, and we pay for it over 5 years and pay an interest rate. That's typically how any equipment or rolling stock that's over $10,000 is purchased via the city's budget process.
So it sounds to me like that's policy.
I think it's an internal policy, and that we've been following for the whole time I've been with the city, which is 18 years. Yes, sir.
Is Lisa or I don't know, Lisa, if you want to expand on that at all?
Sure. Good afternoon, commission members. This is Lisa Saunders. North Carolina Municipal Leasing is a program we set up back in the 80s where we lease purchase equipment for the city. We issue a short-term debt, and we internally basically lease the equipment to ourselves. So it's been a good way for us to provide low-cost financing to departments.
So go ahead, Chris.
No, you go ahead, Dwayne.
Well, I was just wondering, you mentioned like it's a good way to lease equipment to ourselves. Do we make the interest revenue off of this? Does it come back to us?
We do.
Wow. Can I buy my next car through you guys? Would that be okay?
This is Chris, Lisa. If I could just
set up to only lease equipment to the city of Winston-Salem.
Okay.
Lisa, this is Chris Parker. If I could just clarify, now since we are the CCUC and technically not the city, does that interest that we pay actually come back to us or go to the city?
Well, so there's a separate fund that's set up that collects the payments. The city, water and sewer is a utility that is part of the city of Winston-Salem and is recorded as an enterprise fund. The leasing fund is a separate fund with the city of Winston-Salem that holds the debt and collects the money to pay the debt back to the debtor, if I answered that correctly.
Okay, well, I just wanted to make sure. Yeah, as we look at PAYGO, I mean, I don't know what the interest rate is, for this, but if it's all coming back to us, I guess it's a wash. But if it's anything more than 2%, which is what a lot of our bond debt is that we're using PAYGO for, then I would be a little concerned about it.
Well, I mean, I think you need to look a little more holistically at what all you're paying PAYGO for. It could be, we could pay cash for it. But, you know, it's all a matter of where those dollars are going to be funded, which would really need to be looked at the budget process.
Okay, well, I'll ask a few more questions then at that point.
Sure, absolutely.
But one thing, just a real quick question is I look at this large vehicle. So what exactly does it do? Where would I see that in operation? Because it looks like it's on a residential road.
I can answer that, Mr. Parker. This is the standard crew truck that our field operations crews drive and operate. You would see this from a construction crew driving this. It's equipped with several different features, a hydraulic unit to power different tools, a crane in the very back to load and unload heavy equipment and materials, charging stations, that custom tool bed. I believe they set up one side for water-related tools and the other for sewer, because you don't want to mix those back and forth. This would be what your standard construction crew would drive around.
So if we had a water line break, then I might see this vehicle out at it?
You absolutely would.
Okay.
Okay, moving on to item 3, which is consideration of a resolution awarding a contract for utility locating services. The Utilities Field Operations Division needs to contract utility locating services in order to safeguard subsurface utilities from excavation damage. The awarded contractor will receive and respond as required to all excavation notices as directed by Winston-Salem County Utilities in accordance with the North Carolina Underground Damage Prevention Act. A request for proposals was issued for these services, and 6 proposals were received. Based upon the evaluation panel's assessment, it is recommended that a 3-year contract be awarded to LineQuest LLC in the estimated cost for year 1 of $715,500 and a 3-year estimated total amount of $2,196,979. Terms of the RFP reserve the right to extend the service contract for as many as 2 additional 12-month periods for a potential total 5-year estimated contract value of $3,768,954.
Mike, I got a question. Harold.
Yes, Mr. Day.
Do we not pay into this 800 or 811 number for dig?
We do.
Is this part of that money or is something else different?
No, that's actually a separate agreement with NC 811. And I think we pay them about around $40,000 a year for them to receive those and send them out to our field locating contractor.
So this, I'm sort of confused of what are we buying here now? Is it our guys?
This is the service. This is the service for them to actually go out and locate the underground utility and mark the utilities in the field, so that no one damages or digs up any of our infrastructure while they're out there.
So this is basically for our crews to use.
Our crews and anyone else that may be digging around any of our underground facilities.
Okay.
Yeah, so I'll add to that. There's the agreement that we have with NC 811, which is kind of like I don't want to call it a call center, but people call into that and they request to locate. And so 811 dispatches that out to whichever utility in the area that needs to respond to that request. And then this is for a contract with a utility locating firm to do the locates for us, because we don't have enough staff in-house to do all those locates.
So this would have bored that out at Stratford Road with the big water tank when they drill through our water line out there?
Yes, they're supposed to, yeah. So a contractor like this would get the call, the request, and they would locate it for us, yes.
Okay.
Now, Courtney, just so I get a little more clarification on this, because usually there's multiple entities that they're locating lines for, like it might be, electrical, water, gas. So are those other agencies also contributing to the cost? I mean, how do they divide that billing up?
So my understanding, and Mike Stover may want to jump in, or Damon, because I know he was really involved. Each utility pays into the North Carolina 811 system, and then they would have either their in-house crews or, like what we're doing, contracting out locating service. So they would have the same, the same cost, and the fees for us from North Carolina 811 is determined on the estimated calls or the actual calls that we receive each year.
Courtney, in our bid process, did we request from the bidders other utilities that they may be working for?
I'm sure we can request that, whether we did or not. Jerry, do you know if we requested that information?
No, we did not. I cannot locate that. We would ask them. Traditionally, we don't ask them. Verify their capability. As you may recall, we've used USIC for the last several years. So this is a new source for us, and we did verify, staff did verify references that were sent in, but I don't have those readily available to me to share with you. But
I guess I'm following up on Chris's point that if the same company is working for 2 or 3 different utilities out there, and 811 calls all 3 of them, and the same crew goes out and locates everybody at the same time, I mean, apparently we don't know the answers to those questions, and maybe that's something we need to start asking about to make sure that the same company is not doing everything and billing everybody.
I can address a portion of that, Courtney. Yeah. So for example, the city's DOT department also needs locating services for traffic signals and those sorts of things. And so the same firm may come out, but each company is billed separately because it just depends on the location, frankly, and what may be in the ground there. So there may be Duke Energy there. And they may be marking for Duke Energy as well, and there may not be any water and sewer, so we don't get billed for those locates. We only get billed for when they come out and locate our infrastructure. And typically industry-wide in the locating industry, they have a set amount that they'll charge depending on the infrastructure, whether it's fiber optics or telecom, water, sewer, et cetera. And it also depends on the client's requirements. So locating sewer is more difficult than it seems, especially when you're trying to find a service line. It's pretty easy to line up manholes, so they don't charge much for that. But when it comes to locating a service line, that can be more challenging. So there are instances I know where, say, for example, our previous contractor, USIC, was locating multiple utilities. They were under contract with, the power company and AT&T and us. But in general, yes, they're out there on one trip, but there is a tremendous amount of efficiency gained out of that as well. So we're not waiting for separate locating firms to come and locate different utilities at different times. But everyone pays their share of the workload.
So, Damon, I'm still a little confused because we made the selection for this company. So what if Duke Power made a selection for a different company? Does that mean that multiple companies would show up based on that 811 call?
Yes, sir, potentially. And for example, Duke Energy marks all of their own infrastructure downtown, but they use a contractor outside of that area. So even in the case of Duke Energy downtown, our locating company would show up and mark our utilities just like we used to do in the past until we got overwhelmed with the new 811 system. So each utility traditionally came out independently 5 or 10 years ago and marked their own infrastructure. Now, with the introduction of the 811 system statewide, that exponentially grew the number of locate requests that came in with the addition of the statute. So many utilities have gone the contract locator route because the cost of the personnel, the infrastructure, and the vehicles is far more than the contract fees.
Any other questions on item 3? Okay, we'll move on to item 4, which is consideration of a resolution awarding a contract for Avalee, Martin Mill, and Lowry Street lift station upgrades. The Avalee, Martin Mill, and Lowry Street lift station upgrades project. The city advertised bids for this project. The scope of work includes the upsizing of the Avalee station force main and other work at the lift station, such as replacement of pumps, electrical improvements, and bypass pumping. Bids were scheduled to be received on March 8, 2021, but fewer than 3 bids were offered as required by North Carolina general statute, and the project was re-advertised. Bids were received March 18th, with Baker Underground coming in with a low bid at $1,206,650. Baker Underground has agreed to subcontract at a minimum 9% with certified minority-owned businesses and 1% with certified women-owned businesses, exceeding the goals established for this project of 2% minority and 1% women-owned businesses. It is recommended that a contract for the Avalee, Martin Mill, and Lowry Street lift station upgrades project be awarded to Baker Underground, Inc. in the amount of $1,206,650, and that $65,000 be available for contingency. If needed, the engineer's estimate for the project was $1,415,000. Item 5 is consideration of a resolution awarding a contract for brass fittings. This item is for the annual estimated quantities of brass fittings as needed for field operations and meter services. Core and Main was the low bidder for both groups of the specified brass items, and it is recommended that a contract for brass fittings be awarded to Core and Main LP for Section 1 in the estimated amount of $87,852.38, and Section 2 in the estimated amount of $644,681.99, for a total award in the estimated amount of $732,534.37. This award represents a potential increase of $71,283.87, or 10.78% over the prior year's contract award.
Mike, as you mentioned that, this is Chris, as you mentioned that increase of almost 11%, are we just seeing out there that brass is costing that much more?
I believe so. I would yield to Jerry on that for more information.
I'll respond to that. Frankly, all raw materials in this country have gone up substantially. This happens to be brass, but as an example, carbon steel, just your normal rust and water type steel, has doubled in price in the last 6 months. Brass, although it's mined here mostly in the U.S., is still being affected by the pandemic, and those raw material prices have grown substantially.
Thank you, Jerry. There are no other questions there. We'll move on to item 6, which is consideration of a resolution awarding a contract for sediment removal at R.W. Nielsen Water Treatment Plant. The Water Treatment Division needs to contract sediment removal from one of the raw water reservoirs at the Nielsen Water Treatment Plant. This reservoir has a volume of 15 million gallons and encompasses approximately 4.2 acres. The volume of sediment within the reservoir is estimated to be between 25 and 30,000 cubic yards. A request for proposals was issued requesting services for the sediment removal, and proposals were received from 3 contractors. An evaluation panel of city staff reviewed the proposals, and based upon the evaluation panel's assessment, it is recommended that a contract for sediment removal at Nielsen Water Treatment Plant be awarded to Triangle Grading and Paving, Inc. in the estimated amount of $380,000.
Mike, do you know what they're going to do with the sediment?
There is some city-owned property nearby where they're going to be taking it
off Cooper Road.
using it there.
And then doing what there?
They're going to land apply it, so it's going to Cooper Road, which is very, very close to the plant.
Right, but is it, so this is not beneficial use, I mean, forgive me, this is my formal world, but so are we just moving it from one city? I mean, for $15 a yard, it's relatively inexpensive. So are they just moving it and land applying it there like mud?
Correct.
It's not in the floodplain side the creek at Cooper Road, is it?
No, it's up the hill a little bit. It's not
Up the hill a little bit.
It's not in the floodplain.
Okay, all right.
Okay, moving on to item.
I was just curious, when's the last time we've done that? Removed the sediment?
We try to clean out the raw water reservoirs every 5 to 6 years.
That's a lot of volume.
They're two very large reservoirs.
Yeah.
We make a lot of alum mud.
Yeah.
The Yadkin is a very muddy river.
Another point to that is that we don't feel like once we get through with the Nelson modernization project and we're no longer pushing waste from the plant back into the reservoirs, we don't feel like we'll have to wash them out or clean them out as often.
Okay. Item 7 is consideration of a resolution awarding a contract for generator maintenance services at wastewater facilities. The wastewater division of the utilities department needs to contract on-site scheduled preventative maintenance and emergency services for selected generators at the Manson Meads, Archie Elledge, Muddy Creek, and Fry Bridge Road facilities, as well as various lift stations throughout the system. A request for proposals for these services was issued, and proposals were received from 5 contractors. Evaluation panel of city staff reviewed those proposals, and based upon the evaluation panel's assessment, it is recommended that a contract for generator maintenance services for the wastewater facilities be awarded to Clark Power Services, Inc. in the annual amount of $45,791. Terms of the RFP reserve the option to extend the contract for 2 additional 12-month terms for a potential total estimated value of $137,373. Item 8 is consideration of a resolution approving an agreement with HDR Engineering, Inc. of the Carolinas for project management and technical services support for the Advanced Metering Infrastructure Program. In October of 2020, Winston-Salem County Utilities terminated the agreement with its existing Advanced Metering Infrastructure Program management consultant. The scope of that contract included project management and technical services support throughout the implementation of the AMI program. At the time the agreement was terminated, there was $2,244,882 left remaining on that purchase order. On December 17th, 2020, staff issued a request for proposal for project management and technical services support to replace the previous consultant, with submissions received from 10 firms. An evaluation panel of city staff members reviewed the proposals, and 2 firms were selected for shortlist interviews. HDR Engineering, Inc. of the Carolinas was ultimately selected to provide these services after the shortlist interviews. Staff requested a scope and fee from HDR for project management and technical services support for the AMI program. Staff negotiated a fee of $2,236,000 with HDR for these services. Staff finds this fee reasonable compared to other projects with similar scope and services, and recommends approval of an agreement with HDR for the project in the amount of $2,236,000.
Hey, Mike, let me interrupt just a second. Just remind our commission members that the next 2 items, items 9 and 10, that we are in public session, not closed session with attorneys. So as we talk about Muddy Creek, thanks.
Yes, sir. Thank you, Mr. Tuttle. Item 9 is consideration of a resolution approving an amendment to an engineering agreement with Black & Veatch International Company for additional program management and construction administration services associated with the Muddy Creek Consolidated Influent Pumping Station. and South Fork Critical Improvements Program. I'll turn it over to Mike Stover to go into the details of this item.
Thanks, Mike. Most of you all are intimately familiar with this program, but for those of you that aren't, I want to give you a brief history. Years ago, during the last wastewater collection system master plan, a number of near-term projects were bundled into what we call the South Fork Critical Improvements Program. And $121.7 million was appropriated, I believe, in FY 14 to 15. Out of that, there were 9 projects that were funded. They were designed and constructed. The only 2 projects that are remaining is the Muddy Creek Wastewater Treatment Plant project that WH Constructors is working for us on, and the Kearns Mill Lift Station, which is nearing completion as well. All the other 7 projects are complete. So far today, contract engineering, we've spent $14.774 million. There's been 3 amendments for Black and Veatch in the amount of $4.56 million. We have 2 more months left, middle of May, for the Muddy Creek project and the Kearns Mill Lift Station. And then we're going to need some ongoing legal and claim support from Black and Veatch to work with our outside counsel through mediation. So today on, I think, item 10, or 9, I'm sorry, you're looking at a proposed amendment for $1.328 million. We hope this is the last one we have to bring to you. If you add up all of our actual costs, including this proposed amendment, it equals almost $120 million, which is still $2 million below what we appropriated years ago, which really speaks to how well the program in general has been managed. Out of 9 projects, even though one is 3 years behind, we're still under budget. This is a snapshot of the McSips project specifically. Original contract amount, a little over $51 million. Over, I guess, 6 years now, the current contract amount has increased to almost 53. That includes $1.9 million in change orders. Over $1 million of that change order was due to the lagoon cleanout early on in the project. We've received a little over $30 million in claims. That number has not been approved, negotiated, or nothing. That's just what the contractor is submitting. And we are holding $5.2 million in liquidated damages and $2.6 million in retainage. Schedule right now, the original final completion date was June 1st, 2017. After you include weather delays, that type of thing, it's November 19th of 2017. And we anticipate that the final completion date will actually be May of 2021. So we're getting close on getting the project actually complete. Here's the construction update. MWH achieved substantial completion on January 6th, 2021. Like I just said, final completion is expected next month. There's still a few outstanding items, mostly documentation related things, warranties, programming, O&M manuals. They're working through a punch list of about 40 items, and they have to get the elevator and the headwork certified. Remaining engineering activities from Black and Veatch's perspective, they have to inspect the punch list work, close out the project, review any additional change orders, and conduct the record drawings, which is in progress. And I believe this next slide is just a timeline showing when the design contract was approved, CA services contract was approved, amendments 1, 2, and 3, and then we have amendment 4, which is on your agenda today, in bold at the very bottom. Are there any questions on this item? Okay.
Mike, you're on mute.
Thank you, Mike, and thank you, Courtney. Item 10 is consideration of a resolution approving a change order with Womble Bond Dickinson LLP for legal services related to the Muddy Creek Wastewater Treatment Plant Consolidated Influent Pumping Station improvements. In November 2016, Womble Bond Dickinson was hired to provide legal assistance for construction delays on the Muddy Creek Wastewater Treatment Plant Consolidated Influent Pumping Station Improvements Project. To date, $395,000 has been spent on legal and professional schedule analysis services. Due to ongoing legal issues, additional legal and professional schedule analysis services are needed. Staff estimates an additional $300,000 is needed for these services. Womble Bond Dickinson will only invoice for actual expenses incurred. Staff recommends approval of a change order in the amount of $300,000 to cover the cost of ongoing legal fees.
Yeah, folks, I don't want my admonition to mean we shouldn't ask questions. Questions are great. I just wanted to point out that questions to the specific performance of our contractor might not be the best type of question.
I will also add, just to give you a little bit of update on the schedule. So we have a meeting scheduled with MWH and Black & Veatch on May, sometime in May, where
May 11th.
May 11th. Well, they'll be giving, MWH will be giving a presentation, and then in October is when we have a tentative date for mediation scheduled. So it's not until October until that will start. I think it's October 26th or something like that.
Is it, I mean, I'm now almost afraid to ask questions since I've scared myself. Is it fair to say that city staff is considering the extra Black & Veatch and Womble cost as we calculate liquidated damages? As we calculate what we are withholding?
Yeah, so the liquidated damage amount was set when we bid the project, and it was the daily fee was determined off of what the engineering cost would be per day past the completion. So that was how that cost was calculated.
So clearly the Black & Veatch cost is part of the liquidated damages. Okay, thank you.
Correct.
So this is Wesley. So is there a time, Randall, where we will be able to ask those particular questions? I think there are a lot of questions in the back of our minds that we would like to be more specific about.
Yes. So we can, we went into closed session, I guess a couple months ago, and we can schedule another closed session. At any point that the commission feels like they need an update, and maybe not in May. When's the May meeting? I don't have my.
Yeah, I mean, but after your May meeting with to discuss the project, it might be good. I can't remember. You're right. It's either May or June. We hear an update on this.
Yes, I'm thinking so. It looks like we're meeting the day after our commission meeting in May. So I think June. Let's go ahead and plan to have a closed session meeting in June.
Wesley, is that good? Thanks. We're also, our council's not here today, so we could just have a lot of fun and just, go into closed session all by ourselves. But that would probably not be liked.
Yeah, and I don't know. I don't know the requirements if you have to advertise that or not. I don't know. I don't know.
That's just a rule.
Yeah.
You do. I can answer that. Yes, you need to.
And there's the rule for speaking up. Let's just say.
There's our other counsel right there.
I'm just acting in the best interest of the chairman and the commission members.
This is Yvonne Hines. Was this original agreement in 2013?
Yes, ma'am.
Oh, okay.
This project has been going on that long, yes. Okay. Go ahead, Mike.
All right. Go back to item 11. which is consideration of a resolution requesting the City Council of the City of Winston-Salem adopt a resolution approving an application for a North Carolina Drinking Water State Revolving Fund loan for the R.W. Nielsen Water Treatment Plant Modernization Project. The Winston-Salem County Utility Commission has approved appropriations in the amount of $81,870,000 in previous years for the Nielsen Modernization Project. And staff will be requesting an additional appropriation in the amount of $40 million for fiscal year 22. $60 million in state loans are already authorized and approved by all parties for this project. And an additional $20 million has been awarded, but is awaiting local government commission approval, which will give the utility a total of $80 million in state loans for this project. In order to bridge the gap between the project budget and the state revolving fund loans received today, the city would like to apply by submitting a loan application to receive an additional $40 million of potential state funding for this project. And this item requested the City Council adopt a resolution approving an application for the additional $40 million in state loan funds. Staff recommends approval.
This is Harold. I got a question. This is a loan and not a grant. Is that correct?
That is correct.
That is correct.
Okay. So you got to pay it back.
Yes, this is. Yes. I think the interest rate last note we saw, at least it was 1.7. Is that right?
No, it's 1.1. 1.1.
1.1.
Yeah, that's right. And then it's a 20-year payback, but payments start after construction is complete for these type of loans.
Does the 121 million that was in here, I assume that includes engineering also, is that correct?
It does.
Okay.
Okay. Item 12 is our one Planning and Policy Committee item, and it's consideration of a resolution amending sections 25 and 26 of the Sewerage System Policy Resolutions. And I'll turn it back over to Mike Stover to provide information regarding this item.
All right, bear with me, only 4 more slides and I'm done, I promise you. Good neighbor policy. The Planning Policy Committee met on March 15th to discuss some revisions to the Good Neighbor Policy. Also, section 25 and 26 of the Sewer Use Resolution. The Good Neighbor Policy is sewer backup assistance for residents. Here's a brief rundown of the requirements. The backup was caused in the sewer main, not in the sewer connection. It was the first sewer backup at the address. The customer agrees to sign a release waiving any further claims for payment. And the customer agrees to install a backwater valve in the service line to prevent future problems. Here's the reimbursement limits. It can cover insurance deductibles up to $1,000 if the property is insured, up to $15,000 for property damage, up to $5,000 for personal property and/or reasonable hotel accommodations. This next slide is a drawing or schematic showing the breakdown of responsibility for a typical sewer connection. So what we will do, we will come out and repair any defect or break in the right of way. So that dash line right in the middle, that's the right of way line or the easement line. The customer is responsible for getting their sewage or their waste from their home all the way to the sewer main on the very far left side. Any backup between where it enters the main and the house, we do not cover. That is solely on them. Any questions at this point? We got 2 more slides. We'll go over the revisions. Section 25 is regarding maintenance. We're trying to eliminate some ambiguity. We are wanting to replace the word maintain with repair. People have different ideas of what maintain means. And then specify within the limits of the right of way or public easement. Take out the language in blue. And then add after the city will also install suitable clean out fitting at its expense if deemed necessary. We won't do that every single time unless we have to. Section 26, we're proposing to eliminate this entire section C. It is triggered by a very narrow set of circumstances that rarely apply. And it's cleaner if we just take out all service line blockages and stick to just any sewer main blockages that cause, a backup in a home. Any questions on item 11?
Okay. So that finishes the agenda. So, Chairman
Okay,
Tuttle,
so thank you, Courtney and team. Any commission members have an agenda item that they'd like to pull from a consent agenda consideration?
I'd like to move approval of the consent agenda.
Second.
I'm sorry, this is Charles Wilson. I lost Zoom for a second. I need to recuse from item 10. Womble's an office tenant of ours, so I think there's a conflict there for me.
Okay, so I think, okay, Courtney, help me with recusals versus polls.
you have to vote for them, right, Damon?
That's correct. So we need a motion to excuse the commission member from that item and vote on that. And then you can carry on with the entire consent agenda.
Second.
We have a motion and a second to recuse Mr. Wilson from agenda item number 10. And
I have a question. Who motioned? I'm sorry, I didn't see who motioned.
Griffin and then Parker.
Okay,
or Parker, then Griffin.
Okay, thank you.
Voting yes or no, Mr. Curtis?
Yes.
Mr. Day?
No.
Mr. Griffin?
Yes.
Ms. Hines?
Yes.
Mr. Jernigan?
Yes.
Mr. Long?
Yes.
Mr. Parker?
Yes.
Mr. Stewart is not here. Mr. Wilson, I think, can vote on this motion. Mr. Wilson?
Yes.
And Mr. Younger?
Yes.
That motion carries. Mr. Parker, could you specify that the congeners, now we're back to Mr. Parker's motion, that is agenda items 1 through 12, please.
I could make a motion. I think what we are going to have to do is make a motion for items 1 through 9 and 11 and 12.
Right.
And we're going to need to vote on 10 separately. So if I could make a motion for approval of items 1 through 9 and 11 and 12.
Well, hold on one second. Damon, I'm looking at you since you're the rule person. If we've allowed Mr. Wilson to recuse himself from that one item vote, do we have to then vote separately?
Mr. Chairman, you do not. You can vote on the balance, and because of the previous action, the commissioner is automatically excused from that vote.
Got it.
He's
excused. From that vote on that item.
So when he, Chris, presuming you're going to do items 1 through 12, when he votes either yay or nay, it is understood that he is actually not voting on item number 10.
Correct. That is correct.
Okay. Then move approval for items 1 through 12.
Second.
Patrice, that was Mr. Parker, followed by Mr. Griffin.
Mr. Griffin. Thank you.
Any discussion? Voting yes or no, Mr. Younger.
Yes.
Mr. Wilson.
Yes.
Mr. Parker.
Yes.
Mr. Long.
Yes.
Mr. Jernigan.
Yes.
Ms. Hines.
Muted, Ms. Hines.
Yes.
Thank you. Mr. Griffin.
Yes.
Mr. Day.
No.
Mr. Curtis.
Yes.
Patrice, that motion carries with 1 nay vote. Thank you all. I believe, Courtney, we're turning over to Shane.
Yes, we have just a few more slides for the our CIP update.
Before we do that, I just want to clarify, and it doesn't impact what we just voted on, but the reasons for recusal, would I have to recuse myself if a tenant of my firm is involved in a transaction?
I think, and in fact, for our new members, we have an ethics briefing, and the general sense is that if you gain a material benefit,
the deal itself, right?
By the deal itself now, and so I think, and it's different if you're an employee of the firm that you discuss or an owner of the firm that you discuss, if that makes sense.
Just want to clarify, thanks.
And I wouldn't have received any direct benefit from the, from item 10 going to Womble. It's just that being the rent, a separate, financial contract relationship, it seemed that there would be the potential for a conflict for me to vote for items that inure to their financial benefit and ultimately to ours,
The reason why I wanted to clarify that, and this came up when Wesley and I were on the planning board, is that I know a lot of people and a lot of organizations are actually clients of mine through the Small Business Center. So I just want to clarify, I don't have to recuse myself because I know people. I have to recuse myself because I would gain financially from a particular deal.
Correct. And I think it does make a difference if you are an employee of the firm that would gain advantage, or if you're an owner of the firm that gains advantage as well.
Right. Thanks.
Hey, thanks for the question. And so I'm thinking, Alan and Hugh, did you read through our ethics policy? Because every so often we have one of the city attorneys come and visit. And so Courtney, maybe you know the answer to that.
Well, and
Charles was actually the most recent member.
I'm sure he probably hasn't. So it may be worth a refresher at some point for the commission, to ask this type of questions.
Yeah, and to answer your question, Randall, was I went through the process a few times while I was on the planning board, which was right before joining the Utilities Commission.
Yeah. And Courtney, and I'm fine if we need to do that as a refresher for all, but let's definitely add that as a to our packet of new training or new information for commissioners.
Okay, we definitely will.
All right, okay. We always seem to put capital projects to last, but now we at least have 14 minutes. So
yes. Okay, Sammy.
All right, good afternoon, everybody. I will try to talk really fast so everybody can go enjoy this very beautiful day. The first project is Kerner's Mill Lift Station. This project is almost complete. We've finished the final walkthrough. We're currently working on obtaining the final documentation for project closeout. And here you can see a picture of the completed lift station. Kernersville sewer rehab. This is one of our newer projects. So far, 3 streets have been rehabbed. And here you can see the progress map, the black outline is the project's boundary, and the green are the 3 streets they've done so far, and the yellow is what they will be completing, and the red is to be completed. So for, Roswell Lift Station, this project is also near completion. We finished the final blast last Tuesday. Force main installation has been completed, and we are scheduled for the lift station startup for this Thursday. Here you can see the progress map. The green is everything we've done. The red is what's left. Here you can see the Roswell lift station. North Mill Creek, the notice to proceed for this project was in February of last year. Zachary has hired a sub to assist with this project, Bruce Allen, and they are making great progress. Pipe installation is still underway.
This is Chris Parker. If I could ask a question about some of these remote locations on lift stations.
Yes,
do
sir.
we have any security cameras?
We do not. I don't believe so. Should we?
Well, I mean, I'm just wondering, based on the generators and some of that expensive equipment, some vandals could do a good amount of damage.
Yeah, so we do have, yeah, I mean, that's a good question. You know, we have security fencing around all of our lift stations. We have a rotation of when we have to check on them. And obviously we have alarms if that go off and send alerts, you know, either text messages or phone calls to our on call staff if water levels reach a certain point where we're at a fear or where we could have an overflow. So we do have some security measures in place, just not necessarily cameras at all.
Well, I would just think based on the motion sensitive cameras and how much they've decreased in price, that might be something we just want to think about at some point.
Okay. I'm sure our instrumentation and IT folks would love to do that. Oh, sorry, Sheng, I got ahead of you.
You're fine. So this is the North Mill Creek progress map. Good progress has been made along Linda Circle. It's the bottom left-hand corner, the green, and then Scott Hine Park Drive at the upper right-hand-ish. Here you can see a picture of the construction access road that was Allen built to help move materials and equipment to the project site from Midcliff Road. The soil was so saturated due to the wet weather we've had lately, and so they built this access road so they can just keep working. Any questions?
Thank you. I presume we have no visitors. If you are a visitor, you want to speak, now's your time. Hearing none. Does any commission member have any thing they would like to bring before the commission?
Randall, this is Chris Parker. If I could bring this before the commission, I just want to give a shout out to Gail and all the effort she did to bring us home that national championship. I'm not sure the staff could have done it without our hard work and emails and promotion. And I think we got some great publicity in the Winston-Salem Journal. So just a shout out to Gail.
Here.
I've got one question. I get some calls from Old Salem. How are we coming on that project? Are we about done with it?
So our utility water and sewer section, we are very close to it. I believe Ramey's focusing on some of the cityscapes and stuff, but we're pretty close in terms of facilities.
Thank you.
Other thoughts or questions? All right, well, very nice meeting. Mr. Day, would you like to make a motion?
I sure would. It's been a long time since I had lunch. I'd like to make a motion that we resume this meeting next month this time.
Second.
Okay, Mr. Younger.
We have a motion and a second to adjourn the meeting. Any comments or hearing none? Yes or no, please. Mr. Curtis?
Yes.
Thank you. Mr. Day?
Yes.
Mr. Griffin?
Yes.
Ms. Hines? I saw her say yes. Mr. Jernigan?
Yeah.
Mr. Long?
Yes.
Mr. Parker?
Yes.
Mr. Wilson?
Yes.
And Mr. Younger.
Yes.
I thank you all. Thanks staff to a wonderful job this month. I hope everyone enjoys. And April deals with the pollen accordingly, and we'll see you in May, if not before.
Thank you.
Great day, everybody.
Bye.